Hi, nice to meet you all today. And let me share my slides. Like Ashley said, my name is Jackie Case, and I am the founder and executive director of Raphael Village, located in New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm going to start kind of with a bit of a picture of a big overview, where we started, where we are today, and then kind of go into the founding years and give some background of how that kind of took shape, and then moving on into where we are today and where we're kind of headed. So who we are and where we started. Raphael Academy was founded in 2012 as a private school for students who may have autism spectrum disorder, Down syndrome, or other intellectual disabilities. In 2013, just 1 year later, the Guild at Raphael Village, originally known as the Young Adult Program of Raphael Academy, was founded to serve young adults 18 years of age and older who are transitioning out of high school programs. So over the years, those 11 years, Raphael Academy served over 50 families. Many of them still are part of what we call now the Guild at Raphael Village, which is our adult day program. However, due to the declining enrollment post-pandemic, the board shuttered the school in May of 2024 in order to focus on our fastest growing program, which is the Guild. So that's a little bit of big picture. Then where are we today, 2025? Raphael Village is an affiliate member of the Camp Hill Association of North America. We serve 47 Guild members, which comes out to be an average of 40 full-time equivalent individuals per day in our day program, and they range in age from 18 to 37. We run an on-site Dragonfly Cafe, which is a bakery and a market, as a vocational training program. I could spend probably an hour alone on the challenges of a nonprofit trying to run a for-profit cafe restaurant business that's aligned with your mission, but not really mission-centric. But it's been a huge learning experience for both our administration, our board, and our coworkers who actually now are running that program. So in January 2025, just last month, officially launched our new supported employment program, which we call the Hive. And it took about 6 months to really kind of get it established and all the training that goes into the director position and getting licensed with the state, which is Louisiana Rehabilitative Services. You can go, everybody has to go that route, but they're also now opening and encouraging supported employment providers to actually go through the waiver and bill Medicaid services for individuals who maybe have been turned down for working with LRS. So there's a little bit of overlap there that we're still trying to figure out. Currently, we are embarking on a year-long planning project for our future life-sharing community, the Hearth. So I call this section the calling because it's kind of like how did I end up here? I'm an architect by trade and spent over 20 years working in that profession. However, when my son turned 2.5 years old, he received a diagnosis of pervasive development disorder, and that was mainly due to his lack of speech and sensory sensitivities. Years later, this diagnosis would be updated to autism. In those early years, which is around 2000, there were no ABA programs in New Orleans or Louisiana, for that matter. We really felt like we were on an island. And I guess as luck would have it, or fate would have it, one of my architecture clients had moved here from Florida, and she said, "Oh, you need to get in touch with our lead therapist." Her daughter had also had a similar diagnosis. And so we quickly found a certified verbal behaviorist who came in to New Orleans, evaluated my son, and trained a local team who delivered a 30-hour in-home program each week. And yes, it was expensive, as you can imagine. We just basically said, well, we'll invest in his college education now at 2.5 years old. So In addition to this verbal behavior therapy, he also received speech and OT. It really kind of like you're becoming an expert in something overnight. And if anybody else on this call is also a parent, you know exactly, you've done this probably. So we worked with alternative DAN doctors, Defeat Autism Now, Dr. Stanley Greenspan out of Bethesda, Maryland, and some local naturopaths to support his overall health and explore alternative ways to treat his autism. I say treat it because, you know, in the beginning, you kind of are led to believe that if you do enough of this and you do enough of that, they're going to get over it somehow magically. And it took me kind of years to kind of cultivate this understanding that, okay, he's not broken, he doesn't need to be fixed. And what we need to really support is the person that is right here in front of us. So some of those alternative therapies included chelation therapy, tomatis therapy, and floor time. And I guess in hindsight, I would say I don't regret doing any of those because everything came with some kind of progress and wasn't necessarily what we were expecting, but it was always, you know, something to celebrate. In those early years, I left my job as an architect at a local firm and started my own practice in order to have more flexible work schedules. As you can imagine, you're running them to the speech therapy and the OT and coordinating the people coming to the house. And it's a lot, but it just wasn't a question of whether I should do that. It's like, how could I do that? And then there's the question of why Raphael. You know, Raphael is the archangel of healing. And at the time when I was really searching for kind of these middle years of cases, youth of middle school, high school, and then kind of looking forward to where he would be as an adult, it was something that was really kind of just weighing on me, that this is not a moment in time, but a process. And it's a whole lifespan, right? So this healing process wasn't something that takes place or isn't something that takes place overnight. And it's not just about healing the individual, but healing all the people around that individual. And so if it's a little confusing, my son's name is Case. His first name is Case. So he attended the Waldorf School of New Orleans, which is a school for neurotypical students, with a shadow for the first 5 years of his academic career. And that was pre-K through third grade. He learned to read and write, and he knew his times tables 1 through 12. But he still struggled with language, fine motor skills, and socialization. And I often wondered, you know, was it difficult for him to be the only different student in the class? And I didn't want him to feel like he wasn't good enough. So at that kind of stage, we were looking forward to, okay, what is going to be the next best thing to serve him in this moment in time? So he ended up attending a homeschool program and a Catholic school for special needs children for a total of 6 years. They both had really great highlights to those experiences, but something had always been calling me back to the Waldorf school. And there was something really special. I couldn't put my finger on it, but he just seemed to really thrive in that environment. So in 2010, my husband and I decided that we would go visit this school, this Camp Hill school in Pennsylvania that we had heard about. And they worked out of the Waldorf curriculum and adapted it for their differently abled students. And this visit really became the inspiration for Raphael Academy and what would later become Raphael Village. I think after that visit, I told my husband, well, we either have to move or we need to get busy. And you'll kind of see in the next little bit why we felt like we could get busy versus moving based on our experience with the Waldorf School. But what was exciting and kind of different about Raphael Academy was that it was a holistic experiential approach to learning. It was not just about where a child scored on a test, but who they were and how they learned as a unique individual. Speech and movement were all part of the curriculum, incorporated into morning circles with poems and songs, so that children didn't even know they were learning, right? It was a social experiment of sorts. So They also had handwork activities such as crocheting and finger knitting. That's traditionally part of the Waldorf curriculum, and all of that can be adapted for special learners, um, really to work on fine motor skills, and they don't even know they're working on fine motor skills. So also another thing is rather than coming in and getting straight to work, each day started with outdoor play and games, really to start stimulating the brain for learning. So where we are today, our mission and our vision. Raphael Village's mission is to support differently abled individuals in becoming fully engaged in life and community. And that is really left very intentionally broad so that we can fulfill that mission in many different ways. And it changes over time, as it should. And it changes based on the interest and needs of the individuals that we serve. Our longer term vision is to establish an urban Camp Hill life sharing community that includes the Guild, the Hive, and what we're calling the Hearth. We envision this urban village as a place where individuals with disabilities can make their way into a meaningful adult life through a nurturing and supportive environment. I thought it would be important to just share a little bit of the core principles and values of Camp Hill. And a lot of times these are referred to as the essentials. And the first one is to recognize the wholeness of each individual. The foundation of life and work in Camp Hill communities is the conviction that every person is more than their physical and psychological makeup, that their essential spiritual being is unimpaired and whole. In this respect, all of us are equal, no matter what our limitations or gifts appear to be. This first essential and all of these three essentials are shared with every coworker. Sometimes programs call them direct support workers, DSWs. We call them coworkers because they really are, dependent on one another to really make the Guild what it is every day. And it's important that all of these essentials are shared during their onboarding process. They're brought up in professional development. And it's a real opportunity to step aside from this person who may have a physical disability in front of you and say, this is a complete person. And on that level, we are the same. So really identifying with those individuals we serve. The second one is to strive towards personal inner development. Everyone living or working in a Camp Hill is encouraged to take up a path of personal growth and development to strengthen their independent thought and judgment. A lot of times people come and they already have their own religion or spirituality, and we're not trying to define that for them, but we are encouraging them to develop this inner creativity so that everyone around them and themselves kind of takes on responsibility for really enriching those relationships. It's not just about, what it's really about is stepping outside of what are my personal likes and dislikes. What does this person in front of me need? How can I meet that? Yes, they're going to push my buttons and maybe I'm going to have a bad day. How can I learn to start to control myself in this environment so that I'm not overreacting or becoming unsettled myself, right? So how do I ground myself every day so that I can be present for the people that I'm working with? The third one is to bring equality, freedom, and fellowship into our communities. Camp Hill strives to establish interdependent communities based on the ideals of equality in our social cooperation, freedom in our spiritual cultural life, and fellowship in our economic life. There's a presentation right in that third one alone, right? But this idea that I'm not in this for myself. I'm not showing up to this job for a paycheck. I'm showing up to give something of myself. And I'm actually hoping that in return, everyone else is doing the same for me. So that's this interdependent community. The groundwork, like how did I decide, my husband and I decide together how we would go forward with this vision of starting a school back in 2012. At the time, I was a licensed architect. I had 11 years of experience in adaptive renovation of historic buildings. I often wondered why I thought I was qualified to start a school, but it's a process, right? You're used to going through things, projects in a process. You find out what the needs are from your client, you document those, and then you start to imagine. And I think that's one thing that I've always enjoyed and felt I had a strength in, is that my imagination was strong. But here's some other nitty gritty things, right? I served on the board of the Waldorf School for 4 years as their treasurer and board chair before becoming their volunteer administrator. And you might think, who has a volunteer administrator? Well, as a school, we had 50 students in 2005. Hurricane Katrina came in. After it went out, we had 19 students. And so there really weren't the resources available to pay an administrator. Um, and so I stepped into that role basically as a volunteer, and it was somewhat part-time, but that's what was needed at the time. During this time, we also created a development plan that allowed the school to become an accredited member of OSNA. And this plan really included all the areas that a school or a program would need to address in order to be sustainable, such as governance, a 3-year budget, facilities, curriculum, and more. There's a lot more, but I thought I'd just give you the highlights. So having gone through this process with that accrediting agency, I at least had that kind of picture of what was needed to start something. Then there's the actual doing of all of this, right? So, and these are really kind of large bullets. I tried to capture the most important ones, but I'm sure there's probably another 10 we could have put up here. In 2011, we established a group of 4 core board members that included a child psychologist, an attorney, a revenue consultant, and a Waldorf colleague. I also served on the board for the first few years. While that's not necessarily the best practice these days, it was necessary as a startup, just to really kind of have that overlap. And then I would say by 2013, 14, I had stepped off as the board chair. Instead of starting from scratch, and I think this is a really important thing to know, is that we were actually able to take over an existing 501c3 that had originally been just a Waldorf parent group association that had been fostered by one of our new board members, and it had been around since 1987, and it almost was ready kind of to go into dissolution. But we were able to kind of scoop it out of the IRS and show some paperwork, and because its purpose was to promote Waldorf education and Raphael Academy would use the Waldorf curriculum, it was allowed. And so that saved us a lot of time. We have since created a second nonprofit for Raphael Village, so it's totally doable. You just need someone who can help you fill out the longest application of your life. We created bylaws, operating agreements, filed them with both the state and the local agencies, and applied to the Department of Education to become a private special education school. My mentor from Camp Hill was really surprised that we were able to get that so quickly. And I don't know whether that's Louisiana or whether it's because it was a private school and there weren't a lot of quality options out in the public realm. All of that has really changed now quite a bit from back in 2012. We started by offering open houses to the community, and then they kind of continued through 2011, but then we said, okay, now we need to get some commitments to open for 2012, school year of 2012. So we had an after-school program. We actually were fortunate to find our lead teacher at the very first open house. So that also was something that really crystallized more of what we were offering. And We offered the after school program in the spring and the summer camp in the summer. We had a fundraiser in May of 2012, and then we were ready to open our doors in August of 2012. And that ended up being a mixed age group of middle school schoolers. And they kind of were from 6th grade to 9th grade, and there was one individual who was 20. And so I think it was a result of families being frustrated in the typical school system. And by the time they were getting into middle school, the typical things were happening, the bullying, the not getting not having an expectation of continued academic improvement. So that's how we started that first year. But 1 year later, one of the parents of the older student, they said, well, that can't be it. What are we going to do now that our daughter is a young adult? And they're transitioning out of the school system. So somehow across the street from where we were located, a building went up for sale. We were able to purchase that with a loan from a parent and renovate this 330 square foot building into something that would house all of our program, both the school and the young adult program. I continue to maintain the relationship with a mentor from the Camp Hill School that I had met on that very first visit back in 2010. I'd always call to report in what we had done, and they would always be ready with the next thing to do. And I've kind of learned over the years, don't call so often because every time you call, you get a new assignment, right? But it was really important to kind of continually develop that relationship with Camp Hill as we were deciding what kind of organization we want it to be. So in 2017, we applied. So the Guild program started as that young adult program and probably had 6 on average in a single class. But we knew that, for families in our area, Louisiana, to be able to afford a lifetime of potential program fees was not realistic. $15,000 a year is a lot of money in this town. And so the board decided that we would apply to become a Medicaid provider, allowing for greater access to all of our programming. And then one other kind of big piece, I've mentioned this before, but we applied for the supported employment in 2024. We had tabled this due to the pandemic, but it's a big piece. We're very proud of this achievement. And it's a lot slower to get started, so I'll just leave that there. This is a snapshot really of kind of our programming. It's the Guild at Raphael Village. It involves volunteering in the community at the Louisiana Children's Museum, at a local church who does like a food lunch program giveaway once a week. We go on community life engagement outings. It could be swimming, it could be bowling, walking up to the coffee shop, or going to a museum. Again, we have the Dragonfly Cafe where we use that as a vocational training program. So Guild members are rotating through the Guild members who are interested. Not everybody is interested and not everybody has to do that, but they learn everything from learning how to operate the POS system, how to make coffees and bus tables. And it's just an amazing way for us to be engaged with our greater community because it's open to the public 4 days a week. Again, it started off as one thing and it's become something very different, and it's okay. I think that's one of my messages. This dragonfly, we chose that name because the spirit animal of dragonfly is about self-transformation, self-realization. And the Dragonfly Cafe has had to actually do that in order to be successful. It's very hard to start a cafe. It's also very hard to start one in the middle of a pandemic. And so lots of lessons learned, but it's feeling really good right now. So also you may wonder, okay, the Guild at Raphael Village, what does that mean? It really implies doing, right? So that Guild members are engaged in meaningful activities. We have a ceramics program that we have partnered with local people in the community We may bring that now in-house because it can be quite costly um, to always subcontract that out of house. But we did that in the beginning because it was one of the big outings that a small group could go to every week and take part in something that was out in the community. Now we have so much going on in the community, it's not so important that that be out in the community. So that's a change that we're looking at making. You'll see one of these scarves that one of the guild members created in the fiber studio. We have the loom room, we call it, and maybe 8 looms, floor looms, and different table looms, and they can make the most amazing items that we turn around and have markets 3 times a year. Guild members can sell their wares, and they actually make 30% of the sale of the item. So that's something, because we're providing the materials and the staff and the training and oversight. But we really felt it was important that they are making something from their beautiful designs. We also have gardening and culinary arts programming. So instead of just everybody bringing their lunch 5 days a week, we have the culinary program makes a special lunch. We try to always have it healthy and balanced as much as we can and come from the garden when it can. Right now, there's lots coming in from the garden because in Louisiana, this is the growing season, pretty much from October through May. So I think this is kind of a good overview of all of the programming. It's always changing. Our community partners are always changing. There's always different opportunities. And the more that people know about us, they start to reach to us to find those connections, which was really lovely. Funding and fundraising. Both Raphael Academy and the Young Adult Program started off as private pay entities. The Academy did offer some tuition assistance in the very beginning, but resources were tight and assistance was limited, which really precluded many families from being able to enroll at the Academy. Again, our tuition started off at about $13,000 for the day, typical school year. That's a lot still for our community. So as time went on and enrollment plateaued in the young adult program, we added the Medicaid service provider in order to reach more families in need of quality programming. I just, I don't really want to badmouth other providers. But this finding ways to really engage people is the key, right? And I think now we've had parents who left the guild for whatever reason and have come back to say, there is nothing like this in the state. And we need more of it. And unfortunately, we're somewhat at our limit, our capacity that we had planned. I mean, you can always change that, but we're kind of at the point where we're developing a waiting list, which is not a bad place to be, but there's just a need. So we hired a consultant back when we were going to become a Medicaid provider to assist us in writing our DAHAB policy and procedures. That was just not something we knew much about. And we thought, let's leave it up to the people who know how to do it and can kind of educate us on that process. We applied in the fall of 2017. It took about 5 months to get approved, and lots of calls and emails to kind of stay on it. They can really drag out the process. And today we offer both private pay and Medicaid funded options for the day program and supported employment services. I would say we're probably about 80% Medicaid and 20% private pay. And of course, when we first started this route, the board was hoping it would be opposite of that. It's not. So we do have to fundraise about 24% of our budget through an annual, and we do that through an annual tennis and pickleball tournament, an annual appeal, and an annual spring soiree, in addition to ongoing grant writing. We actually subcontract out grant writing, but I end up working a lot with them on description of new programming and budgeting and sorts. So it's a fair amount of time, but it's definitely worth it when you're successful. And this fundraising, I would say almost 25% of our fundraising budget goes towards paying our coworkers 30% higher wages than the typical wage in the state. And I think we have been told that we are the highest paid provider in the state. And we just feel like you have to at least try to attempt to meet people's needs. Some providers pay $12 or $13 an hour, and we typically start around 18 and go up to 20, depending on experience. And then we also have people who are on salaries. So doesn't mean it has to be a huge salary, but it gives, after 3 years, if they feel really like they're going to be with us for a while, we will often move them to a salary. It just helps them with their ability to budget and such. So then we get to some challenges. Of course, COVID was an unforeseen challenge. It occurred right at the end of I say end, but maybe end is not the right term. It's towards the end of the capital campaign for what we call the town center. We were intending on raising some additional funds once construction began in early 2020, but the campaign stalled, of course, when most everybody's attention went to funding needs for COVID. And we ended up with a larger mortgage than we originally anticipated. Again, we're carrying it. We'd love to figure out other ways to not carry it. But this is a picture of that town center at the bottom. You can see it was time specific with all the masks, but we really and we didn't want the building to be like one facility, one building where people felt like they were going to a building every day, but more we could have took one building and made it 3 separate buildings. And there's a courtyard in the back. People can move between classrooms. There's a fairly large green space in the back. And then on the left, this teal building is the Dragonfly Cafe. In addition to the mortgage that we have on the town center, we also took out 2 SBA loans. That really helped us with operating costs that to offset some of our lower enrollment due to the pandemic. But of course, we're also servicing those loans as well these days. The board would like to build an endowment of approximately 3 to 6 months of operating costs to ensure our long-term sustainability. Staffing turnover has always been a challenge since the pandemic. Even though we do pay higher wages to our coworkers than other providers, it's just been challenging. I think anybody in this industry knows that finding people committed and not just showing up to watch someone, make sure they don't get hurt. It's like, how do I really engage and be active with them? And they're part of my life, I'm part of their lives. So this is something that's part of our strategic plan, but we have not solved that yet. Additionally, one of the top needs we have identified in our strategic plan is the need for a gathering hall for plays and festivals and rainy day activities. There's times when we want to come together and celebrate something, and we just don't have a space that's big enough to do that. And we feel like there would be a lot of opportunities to share it with other nonprofits or have concerts in the evenings, because New Orleans is such a rich place for music. It could be a real space that promotes inclusion in our community. Successes. We are at maximum capacity. We call it 40. We want to be at 43 full-time equivalent daily attendees. And what that means is we budget for 40, but we enroll for 43 because we've learned that there's always someone out for whatever reason. So I would say over the years, we've gotten smarter with how we budget. We also don't budget for everybody to be there 230 days of our programming year. So you kind of learn as you go. We have a lovely facility located right in the heart of New Orleans that provides us with easy access to local businesses by bus, coworker vehicles, or on foot. We have a core constituent group of donors who support our mission and vision. We have successfully obtained grant funding for the planning phase of our residential life sharing community and have families who are actively engaged in the planning So I think what's important to say about this hearth is we wrote to two different organizations and got sizable grants that would allow us to hire a Medicaid consultant and a real estate project manager to help us look at all the different scenarios of funding, making sure that we know that it's going to be Medicaid funding. Of course, we will have private pay options, but we know that the majority will come with waivers. And so we're actually we're interviewing the project manager that seems to be at the top of the list this Friday. So hopefully getting started in early March. And we finally launched that supported employment program that we had started right before the pandemic. We were almost ready to apply to LRS back in 2019, and maybe it was 2019, turning 2020, and just had to put it in the oven. It wasn't even on the burner. So looking ahead, I would say succession planning is at the top of our list of goals for the next 5 years, identifying leaders who will uphold our Camp Hill tradition and values. I'm not planning on going anywhere, but I think whenever you have a changeover in leadership, you need to take time to really cultivate that and those relationships and make sure the experience is there. Also, again, the hearth phase one is anticipated to serve approximately 6 individuals in standalone homes or rented apartments. We're working to better understand the models that are available through Medicaid in our state, but we realize that what we want to do is probably not one of those models. And so we are going to most likely be applying to the state for a new model. And but knowing how you get licensed, you have to be offering services to somebody in order to actually go through that final approval process. And it may be easier for us to choose an existing model and implement that as part of phase one, get licensed while we're waiting on that approval from the state for this new model. A new model means basically that there would be a home with 3 individuals with needs living in that home, supported by a live-in householder, someone who was there to, make sure all of the needs were met, but also a live-in coworker who would be not on the clock for all 7 days a week. They would have other responsibilities in the community, and then they would give relief to the main householder when they were had some time off. So again, this is all very big picture, and we still are working to see how that will flesh out. My advice, take it or leave it. Teamwork makes the dream work. The more people you have helping you create this vision, the better. Find a group of families and professionals who have the experience and skill set needed to plan and implement your dream. Hire consultants when needed. Plan, plan, plan. I've learned that as I get a little bit older, and it's really nice to have a plan in place to follow, but also be willing to adapt it as you go along. It's pretty much, here's the blueprint, and then, oh, we ran into this old foundation. We're going to have to kind of adjust now how this space lays out. And that's all it is. You plan and you make adjustments. And I think, yeah, that's pretty much where I would leave it. I wanted to leave some time for questions.